Your Invisible Power by Genevieve Behrend. 10. How I became the only personal pupil of the greatest mental scientist of the present day. As soon as the idea of studying with Troward came to me, I asked a friend to write to him for me, feeling that perhaps my friend could put my desire in better or more persuasive terms than I could employ. To all the letters written by this friend I received not one reply. This was so discouraging that I would have completely abandoned the idea of becoming Troward's pupil, except for the experience I had that day on the street when my whole world was illuminated, and I remembered the promise, "All things whatsoever thou wilt, believe thou hast received, and thou shalt receive." With this experience in my mind, my passage to England was arranged, notwithstanding the fact that apparently my letters were ignored. We wrote again, however, and finally received a reply, very courteous, though not very positive. Troward did not take pupils. He had no time to devote to a pupil. Notwithstanding this definite decision, I declined to be discouraged because of the memory of my experience upon the day when the light and the thought came to me, "I am all the substance there is." I seemed to be able to live that experience over at will, and with it there always came a flood of courage and renewed energy. We journeyed on to London, and from there telegraphed Troward asking for an interview. The telegram was promptly answered by Troward, setting a date when he could see us. At this time Troward was living in Ruan Manor, a little out-of-the-way place in the southern part of England, about 20 miles from a railway station. We could not find it on the map, and with great difficulty Cook's touring agency in London located the place for us. There was very little speculation in my mind as to what Troward would say to me in this interview. There always remained the feeling that the truth was mine, also that it would grow and expand in my consciousness until peace and contentment were outward as well as inward manifestations of my individual life. We arrived at Troward's house in a terrific rainstorm and were cordially received by Troward himself, whom I found, much to my surprise, to be more the type of a Frenchman than an Englishman. I afterwards learned that he was a descendant of the Huguenot race. A man of medium stature, with rather a large head, big nose, and eyes that fairly danced with merriment. After we had been introduced to the other members of the family and given a hot cup of tea, we were invited into the living room, where Troward talked very freely of everything except my proposed studies. It seemed quite impossible to bring him to that subject. Just before we were leaving, however, I asked quite boldly, "Will you not reconsider your decision to take a personal pupil? I wish so much to study with you." To which he replied with a very indifferent manner that he did not feel that he could give the time it would require for personal instruction, but that he would be glad to give me the names of 2 or 3 books, which he felt would not only be interesting but instructive to me. He said he felt much flattered and pleased that I had come all the way from America to study with him, and as we walked out through the lane from his house to our automobile, his manner became less indifferent. A feeling of sympathy seemed to touch his heart, and he turned to me with the remark, "You might write to me, if so inclined, after you get to Paris, and perhaps, if I have time in the autumn, we could arrange something, though it does not seem possible now." I lost no time in following up his very kind invitation to write. My letters were all promptly and courteously answered, but there was never a word of encouragement as to my proposed studies. Finally, about 2 months later, there came a letter with a question in it. "What do you suppose is the meaning of this verse in the 21st chapter of Revelation?" 16. "And the city lieth foursquare, and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal." Instinctively I knew that my chance to study with Troward hung upon my giving the correct answer to that question. The definition of the verse seemed utterly beyond my reach. Naturally, answers came to my mind, but I knew intuitively that none was correct. I began bombarding my scholarly friends and acquaintances with the same question. Lawyers, doctors, priests, nuns and clergymen all over the world received letters from me with this question in them. Later answers began to return to me, but intuition told me that none was correct. All the while I was endeavouring to find the answer for myself, but none seemed to come. I memorized the verse in order that I might meditate upon it. I began a search of Paris for the books Troward had recommended to me, and after 2 or 3 days' search we crossed the river Seine to the Ile de Cite to go into some of the old bookstores there. They were out of print, and these were the best places to find them in. Finally, we came upon a little shop that had the books there. These were the last copies the man had. Consequently, the price was high. While remonstrating with the clerk, my eye rested upon the work of an astrologer, which I laughingly picked up and asked, "Do you think Professor would read my horoscope?" The clerk looked aghast at the suggestion and responded, "Why no, madame, this is one of France's greatest astrologers. He does not read horoscopes." In spite of this answer, there was a persistent impulse within me to go to the man. The friend who had accompanied me in my search for the books remonstrated with me and tried in every way to dissuade me from going to the famous astrologer, but I insisted and she went with me. When we came to his office, I found it somewhat embarrassing to ask him to read my horoscope. Nevertheless, there was nothing to do but put the question. Reluctantly, the professor invited us into his paper-strewn study, and reluctantly, and also impatiently, asked us to be seated. Very courteously and coldly, he told me that he did not read horoscopes. His whole manner said, more clearly than words could, that he wished we would take our departure. My friend stood up. I was at a great loss what to do next, because I felt that I was not quite ready to go. Intuition seemed to tell me there was something for me to gain there. Just what it was I was unable to define, so I paused a moment, much to my friend's displeasure, when one of the professor's enormous Persian cats jumped into my lap. "Get down, Jack," the professor shouted. What does it mean? He seemed to ask himself. Then, with a greater interest than he had hitherto shown in me, the professor said with a smile, "I have never known that cat to go to a stranger before, madame. My cat pleads for you. I also now feel an interest in your horoscope, and if you will give me the data, it will give me pleasure to write it out for you." There was a great feeling of happiness in me when he made this statement. He concluded by saying, "I do not feel that you really care for your horoscope." The truth of this statement shocked me, because I did not care about a horoscope, and could not give any reason why I was letting him do it. However, he said, "May I call for your data next Sunday afternoon?" On Sunday afternoon, at the appointed time, the professor arrived, and I was handing him the slip of paper with all the data of my birth, etc., when the idea came to me to ask the professor for the answer to the question about the 16th verse of the 21st chapter of Revelation. The thought was instantly carried into effect, and I found myself asking this man what he thought this verse meant. Without pausing to think it over, he immediately replied, "It means, the city signifies the truth, and the truth is non-invertible. Every side from which you approach it
in using
is
your
exactly
thought
the
power
same.
for the production of new
Intuitively
conditions.
and undoubtingly, I recognise this answer
1.
as the true one.
Be sure to
And
know
my
what
joy knew
conditions
no
you wish to
bounds,
produce.
because I felt
Then weigh
sure
carefully
that with
to
this
what
direct
further
answer
results
in my
the
possession,
accomplishment of your
the
desire
crowd would
will
accept
lead.
me as his pupil in the fall.
2. By letting your
As the
thought
great
dwell
astrologer
upon a
was
mental
leaving,
picture,
I
you are
explained to him
concentrating
all
the
about my
creative
desire
spirit
to
to
study
this
with
centre,
Troward,
where all
how
its
I had
forces
come from
are
New York
equally
City for
balanced.
that express purpose,
3.
seemingly to no
Visualizing
avail,
brings your
until the
objective
answer
mind
to
into a
this
state
test
of
question had been
equilibrium,
given to me
which enables
by
you to
him.
consciously
He was
direct
greatly
the flow of
interested
spirit
and asked
to a
many
definitely
questions about
recognised
Troward.
purpose.
And when
to
asked
carefully
if
guide
he
your
would please
thought
send
from
me his
including
bill,
a flow
he
in the
smilingly
opposite direction.
replied, "Let me know if the
4.
great Troward accepts
You must
you as
always
his
bear in
pupil,
mind that
and
you are
bade me
dealing with a
good
wonderful
afternoon."
potential energy,
I hastened to my
which is
room
not
to
yet
send a telegram to
differentiated
Troward
into
giving
any
my answer
particular
to the
mould,
question
and
about
that,
the
by the
16th
action of your
verse
mind,
of the
you
21st
can
chapter of
differentiate it
Revelation.
into any specific mould
There was
that
an
you
immediate
will.
response from
Your
Troward
picture
that
assists
said,
you to keep your
"Your
mind
answer
fixed
is
on the
correct,
fact that the
and beginning
inflow
a
of
course
this
of
creative
lectures on the
energy
Great
is taking
Pyramid
place.
in London.
Also,
If you wish
by
to
your mental
attend them,
picture,
we'll be pleased
you are
to have
determining
you,
the direction
and afterwards,
you wish the
if you
sensitive
still wish to
creative
study
power
with me,
to take.
I think
And
it
by
can be
doing
arranged."
this, the
On
externalization
receipt
of
of
your
this
picture
reply,
is a
preparations
certainty.
were at once made to leave
5.
Paris for London.
Remember, when you are visualizing
I attended
properly,
all the
that there is
lectures,
no strenuous
receiving much
effort on your
instruction
thoughts
from them,
to hold your
after
thought
which
forms
arrangements
in
were
place.
made for my studying
Strenuous
with
effort
Troward.
defeats your purpose.
2 days
and
before
suggests
leaving
the
for
consciousness
Cornwall,
of an
I received
adverse
the
force
following
to be
letter from
fought
Troward,
against.
clearly
This creates
indicating the line of
conditions
study
adverse
he
to your
gave me.
picture.
31
6.
Stanwick Road, West
By
Kensington,
holding your picture in a
England.
cheerful frame of
November
mind,
the 8th,
you shut out all
1912.
thoughts that would disperse the
Dear
spiritual
Mrs.
nucleus
Behrend,
of your picture.
I think I had better write
Because
you a
the law
few
is
lines with
creative in
regard
its
to your
action,
proposed
your
studies
pictured
with me,
desire
as I should
is
be sorry to
certain
use
of
be under any
accomplishment.
misapprehension
7.
and so to
The
suffer
seventh
any
and
disappointment.
great thing to remember
I have studied
in
the subject
visualizing
now for several
is that
years
you are making a
and have a
mental
general
picture
acquaintance
for the
with the
purpose
leading
of
features
determining
of
the
most of the
quality
systems
you are giving
which,
to the previously
unfortunately,
undifferentiated
occupy attention in many
energy,
circles
rather
at the
than
present
to
time,
arrange the
such
specific
as
circumstances
the
for its
tarot,
manifestation.
the Kabbalah,
That
and
is the work
like.
of creative
And I have no
power
hesitation
itself.
in saying
It will
that to
build
the
its
best of
own
my
forms of
judgment,
expression
all
quite
sorts and
naturally,
descriptions of
if you will
so-called
allow it,
occult studies
and save you a
are in
great
direct
deal of needless
opposition to the real
anxiety.
life-giving
What you
truth.
really want
and
is
therefore
expansion in
you
a
must
certain
not expect
direction,
any teaching
whether
on
of
such
health,
lines
wealth,
as these.
or whatnot.
We hear
And
a great
so long
deal
as
these
you get
days
it,
about
as you
initiation.
surely will if you
But
confidently
believe
hold
me,
your picture.
the more you try to
What does
become
it
a
matter whether it
so-called
reaches you
initiate,
by
the
some
further
channel
put
which you
yourself
thought
from
you could
living
count
life.
upon,
I
or through
speak
some
after
other
many
of
years
whose
of careful
existence
study
you
and
had no
consideration
idea?
when I
You're
say that the
concentrating
Bible
energy
and its
of a
revelation
particular
of Christ
kind for a
is the
particular
one thing
purpose.
really worth studying.
Bear this in mind,
and that is a
and
subject
let
large
specific
enough in
details
all
take care
conscience,
of themselves,
embracing as it
and
does
never mention
our
your
outward
intention
life
to
and of
anyone.
everyday concerns.
Remember
and also
always
the inner
that
springs of
nature,
our
from her
life,
clearly
and
visible
all that we
surface
can in
to
general
her
terms
most
conceive
arcane
of the
depths
life in the
is
unseen,
one great storehouse
after
of
putting
light
off the body
and good,
at death.
entirely devoted to your
You have
individual
expressed
use.
a very great degree of
Your
confidence
conscious
in my
oneness with
teaching,
the great
and
whole
if your confidence
is the secret of
such that
success.
you wish, as you
When
say,
once you have
put
fathomed
yourself
this,
entirely
you can
under
enjoy
my
your
guidance,
possession of the
I
whole,
can only accept
or
it
a
as a
part
very
of it
serious
at will,
responsibility,
because
and
by
should
your
have to ask you
recognition
to
you
exhibit
have
that
made it,
confidence
and
by
can
refusing to
increasingly
look
make it
into
yours.
such so-called mysteries
Never
as I
forget
would
that
forbid
every
you to look
physical
into.
thing, whether for you
I'm speaking
or
from
against
experience,
you, was a
but the
sustained
result will be
thought
that much of
before
my
it was a
teaching
thing.
will appear to be very simple,
Thought as thought
perhaps to
is
some
neither
extent
good nor
dogmatic.
bad.
It is
You will say
creative
that you've
action,
heard
but
much of it
always
before.
takes
physical form.
Faith in God,
Therefore, the
prayer
thoughts
and
you
worship,
dwell upon become
approach
the
to the
things
Father
you
through
possess
Christ.
or do
All
not
this is,
possess.
in a certain sense, familiar to you.
End of
And
chapter
all I can
7.
hope to do is perhaps to throw a little more light on these subjects, that they may become to you not merely traditional words, but present living facts. I have been thus explicit, as I do not want you to have any disappointment, and also I should say that our so-called course of study will only be friendly conversations at such times as we can fit them in, either you coming to our house or I to yours, as may be most convenient at the time. Also, I will lend you some books that will be helpful, but they are very few and in no sense occult. Now, if all this falls in with your ideas, we shall, I am sure, be very glad to see you at Ruin Manor, and that you will find that the residents there, though few, are very friendly, and the neighbourhood very pretty. But on the other hand, if you feel you want some other source of learning, do not mind saying so, only you will never find any substitute for Christ. I trust you will not mind my writing you like this, but I do not want you to come all the way down to Cornwall and then be disappointed. With kindest regards, yours sincerely, signed, T. Troward. This copy of Troward's letter, to my mind, is the greatest thing I can give you. End of chapter 10. How to bring the power in your word into action. In your every word there is the power germ that expands and projects itself in the direction your word indicates, and ultimately develops into physical expression. For example, you wish to establish joy in your consciousness. Just repeat the word joy secretly, persistently, and emphatically. The joy germ begins to expand and project itself until your whole being is filled with joy. This is not a mere fancy, but a truth. Once you experience this power, you will daily prove that these facts have not been fabricated to fit a theory, but the theory has been built up by careful observation of facts. Everyone knows that joy comes from within. Another may give you cause for joy, but no one can be joyous for you. Joy is a state of consciousness, and consciousness is purely, Troward says, mental. Mental faculties always work under something which stimulates them, and this stimulus may come either from without, through the external senses, or from within, by the consciousness of something not perceptible on the physical plane. The recognition of this interior source of stimulus enables you to bring into your consciousness any state you desire. Once a thing seems normal to you, it is as surely yours, through the law of growth and attraction, as it is yours to no addition after you have the conscious use of figures. This method of repeating the word makes the word in all its limitless meaning yours, because words are the embodiment of thoughts, and thought is creative, neither good nor bad, simply creative. This is the reason why faith builds up and fear destroys. Only believe, and all things are possible unto you. It is faith that gives you dominion over every adverse circumstance or condition. It is your word of faith that sets you free, not faith in any specific thing or act, but simple faith in your best self in all ways. It is because of this ever-present creative power within the heart of the word that makes your health, your peace of mind, and your financial condition a reproduction of your most habitual thought. Try to believe and understand this, and you will find yourself master of every adverse circumstance or condition, a prince of power. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12. How to increase your faith. But, you ask, how can I speak the word of faith when I have little or no faith? Every living thing has faith in something or somebody. It is the quality of the creative energy in the positive faith thought which gives it vitality, not the form it takes. Even intense fear is alive with faith. You fear smallpox because you believe it possible for you to contract it. You fear poverty and loneliness because you believe them possible for you. It is your habitual tendency of thought that reappears in your mind, your body and your affairs, not the occasional thought upon some specific line or desire. It is the faith which understands that every creation had its birth in the womb of thought words that gives you dominion over all things, your lesser self included, and this feeling of faith is increased and intensified through observing what it does. This observation is the observation of your state of consciousness when you did, not when you hoped you might, but feared it was too good to be true. How did you feel that time when you simply had to bring yourself into a better frame of mind and did, or you had to have a certain thing and got it? Live these experiences over again and again, mentally, until you really feel in touch with the self that knows and does, and the best there is yours. End of chapter 12. Chapter 13. The reward of increased faith. Because you have expanded your faith into the faith and laws of the universe that know no failure, your faith in the best of yourself, the principle of life in you, has brought you into conscious realization that you are not a victim of the universe, but a part of it. Consequently, there is that within yourself which is able to make conscious contact with the universal principle of law and power, and enables you to press all the particular laws of nature, whether visible or invisible, into serving your particular demand or desire, and thereby you find yourself master, not a slave, of any situation. Troward tells us that this mastering is to be accomplished by knowledge, and the only knowledge which will afford this purpose, in all its measureless immensity, is the knowledge of the personal element in universal spirit, and its reciprocity to our own personality. In other words, the words you think, the personality you feel yourself to be, are all reproductions in miniature or specialized God or universal spirit. All your word thoughts were God word forms before they were yours. The words you use are the instruments, channels, through which the creative energy takes shape. Naturally, this sensitive creative power can only reproduce in accordance with the instrument through which it passes. All disappointments and failures are the result of endeavouring to think one thing and produce another. This is just as impossible as it would be for an electric fan to be used for lighting purposes, or for water to flow through a crooked pipe in a straight line. The water must take the shape of the pipe through which it flows. Even more truly, this sensitive, invisible, fluent substance must reproduce outwardly the shape of the thought word through which it passes. This is the law of its nature. Therefore, it logically follows, as a man thinketh, so is he. Hence, when your thought, or word form, is in correspondence with the eternal constructive and forward movement of the universal law, then your mind is the mirror in which the infinite power and intelligence of the universe sees itself reproduced, and your individual life becomes one of harmony. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14. How to make nature respond to you. It should be steadily borne in mind that there is an intelligence and power in all nature and all space that is always creative and infinitely sensitive and responsive. The responsiveness of its nature is twofold. It is creative and amenable to suggestion. Once the human understanding grasps this all-important fact, it realizes the simplicity of the law of life. All that is necessary is to realize that your mind is a center of divine operation, and consequently contains that within itself which accepts suggestions, and expect all life to respond to your call, and you will find suggestions which tend to the fulfillment of your desire coming to you, not only from your fellow men, but also from the flowers, the grass, the trees, and the rocks, which will enable you to fulfill your heart's desire if you act upon them in confidence on this physical plane. Faith without works is dead, but faith with works sets you absolutely free. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15. Faith with works. What it has accomplished. It is said of Tyson, the great Australian millionaire, that the suggestion to make the desert land of Australia blossom as the rose came to him from a modest little Australian violet, while he was working as a bushman for something like 3 shillings a day. He used to find these friendly little violets growing in certain places in the woods, and something in the flower touched something akin to itself in the mind of Tyson. And he would sit on the side of his bunk at night and wonder how flowers and vegetable life could be given an opportunity to express itself in the desert land of Australia. No doubt he realised that it would take a long time to save enough money to put irrigating ditches in the desert lands, but his thought and feeling were sure it could be accomplished, and if it could be done, he could do it. If there was a power within himself that was able to capture the idea, then there must be a responsive power within the idea itself that could bring itself into a practical physical manifestation. He resolutely put aside all questions as to the specific ways and means which would be employed in bringing his desire into physical manifestation, and simply kept his thoughts centred upon the idea of making fences and seeing flowers and grass where none existed. Since the responsiveness of reproductive creative power is not limited to any local condition of mind, his habitual meditation and mental picture set his ideas free to roam in an infinitude, and attract to themselves other ideas of a kindred nature. Therefore, it was not necessary for Tyson to wait and see his ideas and desires fulfilled until he had saved from his 3 shillings a day enough money to irrigate the land, for his ideas found other ideas in a financial world which were attuned in sympathy with themselves, and doors of finance were quickly opened. All charitable institutions are maintained upon the principle of the responsiveness of life. If this were not true, no one would care to give, simply because another needed. The law of demand and supply, cause and effect, can never be broken. Ideas attract to themselves kindred ideas. Sometimes they come from a flower, a book, or out of the invisible. You are sitting or walking, intent upon an idea not quite complete as to the ways and means of fulfilment, and behold, along comes another idea, from no one can tell where, and finds friendly lodging with your idea, one idea attracting another, and so on until your desires are physical facts. You may feel the necessity for an improvement in your finances, and wonder how this increase can be brought about, when there seems to suddenly come from within the idea that everything had its birth in thought, even money, and your thoughts turn their course. You simply hold to the statement or affirmation that the best, and all there is yours. Since you are able to capture ideas from the infinite through the instrument of your intuition, you let your mind rest upon that thought, knowing full well that this very thought will respond to itself. Your inhibition of the thought of doubt and feeling of anxiety enables the reassuring ideas to establish themselves and attract to themselves I can and I will ideas, which gradually grow into physical form of the desire in mind. In the conscious use of the universal power to reproduce your desires in physical form, 3 facts should be borne in mind. First, all space is filled with a creative power. Second, this creative power is amenable to suggestion. Third, it can only work by deductive methods. As Troward tells us, this last is an exceedingly important point, for it implies that the action of the ever-present creative power is in no way limited by precedent. It works according to the essence of the spirit of the principle. In other words, this universal power takes its creative direction from the word you give it. Once man realizes this great truth, it becomes the most important of all his consideration with what character this sensitive reproductive power is invested. It is the unvarying law of this creative life principle that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. If you realize the truth that the only creative power can be to you only what you feel and think it to be, it is willing and able to meet your demands. Troward says, if you think your thought is powerful, then your thought is powerful. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, is the law of life, and the creative power can no more change this law than an ordinary mirror can reflect back to you a different image than the object you hold before it. As you think, so are you, does not mean as you tell people you think, or as you would wish the world to believe you think. It means your innermost thoughts, that place where no one but you knows. None can know the Father save the Son, and no one can know the Son but the Father. Only the reproductive creative spirit of life knows what you think until your thoughts become physical facts and manifest themselves in your body, your brain, or your affairs.
that everyone with whom you come in contact may know, because the Father, the intelligent creative energy which heareth in secret, hears your most secret thoughts, rewards you openly, reproduces your thoughts in physical form. As you think you know, that is what you become, should be kept in the background of your mind constantly. This is watching and praying without ceasing. And when you are not feeling quite up to par physically, pray. End of chapter 15.